Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome back to the continuation of this Central Committee meeting of Parliament, Central Committee meeting number 22. This Central Committee meeting that started on Monday deals with the draft ordinance establishing the budget for St. Martin for the year 2025 as received from the government of St. Martin. This meeting of the Central Committee of Parliament started out with a brief introduction by the Prime Minister, followed by an elucidation and presentation by the Minister of Finance regarding not only the budget before us, but also the reasons why we are dealing or we have to deal with a second budget 2025 for the country St. Martin. Having put all of that forward during the beginning parts of this meeting, the ministers then came in to respond to questions posed by members of Parliament. That has been taking place throughout the last couple of days, and we now have the Minister of Finance here in Parliament. However, having responded to the questions regarding the Ministry of Finance, the Minister Marinka Gumbs is here today to, in her capacity as acting for the Minister of Justice, is here to provide answers to the questions posed by members of Parliament for the Ministry of Justice. So, members of Parliament, welcome back after the break. And Minister, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting as I now give you the floor to provide answers asked of the Ministry of Justice, in whose absence of the Minister, in the absence of Minister Natalie Tacklin, the Minister of Finance will provide the answers of that ministry. Minister Marinka Gumbs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to the honorable members of Parliament, persons in the Tribune, those listening on radio or social media platforms, my staff, and the staff of the Justice Ministry. Good afternoon and blessed day to all. In my capacity as Acting Minister of Justice, I'm here to respond to the questions posed by the honorable members of Parliament, starting with the UP faction, MP La Cruz. During previous budget debates, concerns were raised regarding the lengthy processing times for residency permits. Can the department explain the reasons for these extended delays? Additionally, given that there has been no notable increase in the budget allocation for staffing, can the department clarify whether staffing shortages are a legitimate reason for the backlog? Madam Chair, the delays in processing residency permits are due to a combination of factors. While limited staffing continues to affect overall capacity, we also acknowledge that the CRM automation system introduced in 2022 has not performed as intended and has contributed to the backlog. We are currently auditing the system and transitioning to purpose-built immigration software. In parallel, we are reviewing internal work processes to improve efficiency. While delays are sometimes caused by incomplete or invalid submission from applicants, we recognize that more proactive communication and better systems are needed to prevent such issues. Addressing this remains a priority for the ministry. Next question. I previously mentioned that a project related to the safety of Phillipsburg had been funded. I would like to clarify, once a government-funded project has been paid for, who holds responsibility for its execution? Specifically, I am referring to the project concerning the newer Hef Bowman in Phillipsburg. Has this project been reviewed or assessed? If so, could you please provide an update? Madam Chair, through you, this is currently being discussed with the Cabinet of TIAT. Next question. In cases where a politician is convicted of committing a crime in collaboration with the Minister of Romi and is ordered to repay, for example, 10 million guilders, the recovered funds are directed to the crime fund. while the government bears the cost of the investigation and legal proceedings. Given that the politician effectively stole from the government and the government undertakes the efforts and expenses to recover the stolen funds, why are these funds not returned directly to government's coffers? Madam Chair, through you, this is regulated by law. See Article 3 of the National Ordinance regulating the Crime Fund. Next question. Is there existing legislation that mandates the funds be directed to the Crime Fund instead of the government? If so, what legislative changes would be necessary to ensure that in such cases, stolen funds are returned directly to the government? Madam Chair, through you, yes, the National Ordinance regulating the Crime Fund, Landverordening, Criminaliteitsbestrijdingsfonds. Next question. Article 5.1 of the Crime Fund states that each year when submitting the budget, the minister must submit a policy plan to identify the projects that are eligible for financing from the Crime Fund in the budget year. Has such a policy been presented this year? If so, can we get a copy? Madam Chair, through you, indeed, Article 5.1 of the Crime Fund stipulates that a policy plan must identify the projects eligible for financing. For 2025, no overarching policy plan is yet in effect. Only incidental requests have been approved. These involved 2 court-mandated cases focused on prevention and reintegration of mental health patients, where specialized services were unavailable locally. Law enforcement chaperoning costs were also covered. In line with recommendations from the Law Enforcement Council, an amendment to the National Ordinance governing the Crime Fund, along with an accompanying policy framework, is currently being drafted and is slated for completion in 2025. However, the minister has proactively engaged various organizations and invited proposals aligned with crime prevention goals. We are currently awaiting proposals from 3 potential projects that, if deemed suitable, may be financed through the Crime Fund and incorporated into the upcoming policy plan. Next question. Who bears the cost for towed vehicles if they remain unclaimed for over 3 months? Madam Chair, through you, according to the towing policy, if the owner or user of the vehicle does not claim it within the required time frame of 4 weeks, the vehicle will be sold or destroyed. The owner or user will be responsible for covering the actual cost of these procedures, minus any potential revenue generated from the sale of the vehicle or its materials. This includes any applicable taxes. All risks associated with towing and storage, including any unintended damage that could not be reasonably avoided, are the responsibility of the owner or user of the vehicle. Exceptions to this policy apply in cases where state authorities or a court determine that the towing was unlawful. In such cases, the state will be responsible for the cost and risk associated with towing and storage. Next question. Is there a formal procedure for how long a towing company may hold such vehicles before they are relocated, auctioned, or otherwise disposed of to recover costs? Madam Chair, through you, if the owner or authorized user of the vehicle fails to claim it within the designated time frame of 4 weeks, the vehicle will be subject to further action. This may involve either selling the vehicle at auction or, if necessary, having it destroyed. It is important for the owner or user to be aware of this time frame to avoid losing their vehicle permanently. Next question. What measures are in place to ensure towing companies are not left with unpaid bills after fulfilling their contracted duties? Madam Chair, through you, the ministry has established a towing policy, accompanied by a rotational towing program designed to effectively manage vehicle towing needs. However, at this moment, there are no towing companies officially contracted to provide services for justice. In order to kickstart the rotational towing program, we require a minimum of 3 towing companies to participate. As of now, only 1 company has shown interest in being part of this initiative. Unfortunately, this particular company does not meet the established criteria due to its inadequate storage facilities for impounded vehicles. Next question. Additionally, it has been reported that a particular towing company can no longer use its current storage location. What is the government's plan for the particular area? Madam Chair, through you, we are currently investigating this matter thoroughly. If it becomes necessary to provide further clarification or information, we will ensure that a formal written response is sent to you. Last question. If there is no plan, what is the intended solution for the storage of towed vehicles currently held near the former receiver's office? Madam Chair, through you, this will be discussed in the next upcoming Driehoek meeting. I now move on to questions posed by MP Otley. Will a budget amendment be required to address the emergency costs associated with the recent crisis at the prison? Madam Chair, through you, at this stage, we are still exploring whether the necessary funding can be secured within the 2025 budget through internal reallocation across budget posts. To ensure continuity in critical recovery and repair work, we are also seeking to pre-finance certain emergency expenditures through the Crime Fund. Should these measures prove insufficient, the possibility of a budget amendment cannot be ruled out. Next question. Following last Friday's court ruling against the Ministry of Justice concerning the prisoner transferred to Simpson Bay and the broader acknowledgement that the prison constitutes an inhumane facility, despite ongoing crisis and warnings from the MP, can you clarify? Madam Chair, through you, the court ruled on June 9th that any detention to the police cells longer than 10 days violates Article 3 of the European Human Rights Convention due to the detention conditions in these cells. Despite the damages caused by the May 14th riot and fire in Point Blanche, the court ruled that the ministry must comply with the 10-day rule and transfer the detainee from the police cells back to Point Blanche or must pay a fine. Next question. What type of expert was brought in to manage the crisis? Madam Chair, no external experts were specifically contracted or remunerated for crisis management. The personnel from UNOPS have been supporting us as part of their existing mandate related to the new prison project. Additionally, the Ministry of Bezeka provided temporary support through personnel within the scope of our existing cooperation agreements. Next question. What specifically is their experts' role or mandate? Madam Chair, through you, their roles include supporting crisis management efforts and contributing to the development of strategies aimed at restoring normal operations within the Point Blanche prison. Next question. What is the total cost of this expert engagement? Madam Chair, through you, there are no direct costs incurred by the Ministry of Justice for this expert engagement, as the support falls within existing cooperation agreements. Next question. Given the lack of basic provisions for inmates, how is funding being prioritized to pay for these expert services? Madam Chair, through you, all available resources are being prioritized to stabilize the situation at the prison, with particular focus on restoring basic provisions and ensuring the safety and security of the inmates, staff, and the wider public. The expert support currently in place comes at no additional cost to the ministry and is made possible through existing cooperation frameworks. Next question. We have the Dutch Marines, Navy, Coast Guard, the Point Blanche Guards, guards from Bonaire and Aruba coming. What are the financial ramifications of such? We have guards presently not showing up to work. Was a call made to gather the troops and ensure that we have enough locally? Madam Chair, through you, there is no payment required for the assistance provided by the Dutch Marines, as their deployment falls within Kingdom cooperation agreements. The Navy and Coast Guard have not been involved in the current prison response. The government of St. Martin is covering the costs relating to the deployment of correctional officers from Curacao and Aruba. Aruba has generously covered parts of the deployment costs for its officers as a gesture of kingdom solidarity. Expenses borne by St. Martin including housing, transport, and daily allowances. Locally, additional personnel from the Immigration and Border Protection Services, IBPS, and the Police Force of St. Martin, CAPSM, have been supporting operations. CAPSM has also assisted with inmate transportation. The Voluntary Corps of St. Martin, VKS, continues to provide support under its existing agreement with the Ministry of Justice. Efforts have been made to secure all available local personnel through absenteeism remains a challenge. Nonetheless, all involved partners have contributed significantly to ensuring safety and stability during this critical period. Next question. In 2021, these cases at the European courts for violation of human rights were handled. The clients received more or less 3,000 euros in compensation, and lawyers' fees needed to be paid as well. If this happens again, who will pay for it for country St. Martin? Madam Chair, through you, under the Charter of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Kingdom bears ultimate responsibility for human rights violations within its sphere, including St. Martin. As such, liability cannot rest solely with one country. For European courts, the Kingdom is regarded as a single entity, not a collection of separate islands. Therefore, the financial burden will fall on the Kingdom as a whole. When was the last time the Minister received a report from the Central Board of Probation? Madam Chair, through you, a report was received on June 4, 2025. The J&IS advises on all early release cases. Next question. How quickly can the Minister urgently assess all current inmates to gather a synopsis of the following: scheduled releases, crime category and severity, whether violent or nonviolent, stage of sentence, type and length of sentence, whether conditional or unconditional? Madam Chair, through you, this discussion will have to take place with the relevant stakeholders who are legally affiliated with this specific process to establish a timeline. Next question. As asked in the Justice meeting, what are the plans for training personnel? Madam Chair, through you, for the prison, there are no further plans for this year due to a lack of funding. The most recent executive staff training was funded by BZK and concluded in March 2025. Future planning will require collaboration with UNODC. Next question. In your letter to Parliament dated March 4th, you indicated that one of the amendments suggested in January 2025 through the note of an unwising is IS 470 was not for new expenditures, but for critical vacancies. Can you explain which vacancies there are? I see in the two-lichting there are 24 budgeted vacancies. Is this accurate, and does the Minister of Justice see this fulfillment possible in 2025 and realistic? Madam Chair, through you, the amendment was implemented to accommodate the critical function of Head of Judicial Affairs. This vacancy is currently in the selection process at HR. Additionally, it was made to provide for the inclusion of 6 individuals designated for the Foreign Detention Center, of who have been recently hired. Next question. The judge rendered a verdict for inmates to be transferred within 24 hours, and every day after that is a fine between 5,000 and 50,000 guilders. Where will this cost come from if the prisoners are not transported back within 24 hours? Madam Chair, through you, the costs have to come from the Ministry of Justice. However, the ministry complied in time with the court ruling. I now move on to questions from the Now faction. MP Lewis. Could you please provide an update on the total retroactive payments to justice workers and personnel, including the prioritization of pension workers, as I previously discussed with the Minister of Justice. Madam Chair, through you, to date, a total of 6.4 million guilders have been disbursed in retroactive payments to 278 employees within the justice sector. An additional estimated sum of 44.5 million guilders is necessary to fully address the outstanding retroactive compensation owed. This compensation pertains to the period spanning from October 10th, 2010 to December 31st, 2022, and covers various entitlements due to the justice workers during that time frame. The ministry has developed a comprehensive phased payout plan in collaboration with the CCSU. This structured approach allows for the disbursement of larger sums over an extended timeline of up to 10 years, while smaller payout amounts are scheduled for shorter installment periods. Additionally, there is a specific provision within this plan for civil servants who are over the age of 60. For this group, the payout process will be expedited, ensuring that they receive their complete settlement within a span of no more than 4 years. This special consideration is designed to support senior civil servants in addressing any urgent financial needs they may have as they approach retirement. The ministry is committed to ensuring that all justice workers receive their retroactive payments in a fair and timely manner. Next question. What discussions are ongoing to amend fees for overall immigration services? Madam Chair, through you, yes, the Ministry of Justice is actively reviewing the legislative ordering with the objective of modernizing the fee structure for, amongst others, immigration services. The current ordinance is outdated and does not reflect the actual costs incurred by government to deliver these services, nor does it cover the wide range of documents and services now routinely provided, such as dispensation letters, visa waiver requests, or administrative screenings, many of which are not even listed in the existing schedule. As a matter of principle, government fees are not intended to serve as revenue-generating tools in the commercial sense, but rather should reflect the real cost of processing and providing a service, in line with the principle of cost equivalence. However, the current reality is that the operational cost of delivering services far exceeds what is covered in fees, placing additional pressure on the ministry's limited budget. Furthermore, the current ordinance does not differentiate based on the nature or complexity of the application. For example, the same fee may apply to a residence permit for a minor under family reunification and to permit issued to a director of a high-income enterprise, despite the vast different economic context and administrative effort is involved. The ministry is therefore preparing an amendment to the legislative ordering that will, 1, align fees more closely with actual costs of service delivery, 2, introduce a more proportionate and differentiated fee structure based on purpose and applicant profile, and 3, ensure that all recurring and new services offered by IBPS are legally covered under the ordinance. Next question. Why can't the people requesting a police record of VOG receive this on time? Madam Chair, through you, the details in issuing the Declaration of Conduct, VOG, are primarily due to capacity constraints within the department in Curacao responsible for processing these requests. This unit handles VOG applications for all Dutch Caribbean islands, except Aruba, including St. Martin, and is currently facing a high volume of applications with limited staff capacity. Moreover, the judicial documentation needed for these screenings is housed at the Public Prosecutor's Office in Curacao. As this information is not maintained locally in St. Martin, this makes the process dependent on external timelines beyond the ministry's immediate control. That said, we are actively engaged in discussions with the relevant stakeholders to identify practical improvements and long-term solutions to ensure more timely processing of these requests. Next question. What is the update of the national decrees for the remainder of the justice personnel? The Minister of Justice has only co-signed 2 batches while she has been in office for more than 6 months. Madam Chair, through you, the Ministry of Justice is optimistic about meeting its projected timeline for the completion of all national decrees and financial transactions, with expectations set for finalization by the conclusion of the 4th quarter of 2025. This ministry is committed to maintaining transparency and efficiency throughout this process to achieve its goals within the specified time frame. Next question. Could you please provide an update on the status of the police holding cells in Phillipsburg, including any recent developments or renovations? Additionally, what are the costs of the repairs? Madam Chair, through you, the renovation of the police holding cells in Phillipsburg is a critical component of the broader efforts to enhance detention conditions in St. Martin. The National Recovery Program Bureau, NRPB, has allocated over $500,000 for repairs, addressing recommendations from the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture, CPT. While initial interventions have been made, further work is necessary to achieve lasting improvements. Current budget and repair plans, approximately $300,000 remains unallocated within the existing budget. The engineering firm, Independent Consulting Engineers NV ICE, has assessed the required repairs, identifying the need for extensive work beyond cosmetic fixes. This includes roof repairs, ventilation, electrical safety upgrades, mold remediation, and structural reinforcements to create a safer environment for detainees and staff. A tender for urgent roof repairs estimated at $220,000 is currently being prepared and is expected to be launched shortly. Proposed intervention options. To guide decision-making, 3 intervention options have been outlined. Option 1, minimum scope, CPT compliance only, focuses solely on addressing CPT recommendations. Total estimated cost, $520,000. Budget shortfall, $220,000. Option 2, medium scope, safety and operational enhancements, includes CPT items and additional repairs essential for safety and functionality, such as lighting, locks, HVAC, and CCTV. Total estimated cost, $1,100,000. Budget shortfall, $800,000. Option 3, full scope, all identified repairs, encompasses the full scope of work as outlined by ICE, covering all construction, MEP, security, and structural issues. Total estimated cost, $1,300,000. Budget shortfall, $1 million. The budget estimates for option 2 and 3 are similar due to specific bulky items identified as crucial for safe operations, such as communications and security systems, $308,000. Full replacement of sanitary provisions, $60,000, and work on a generator, $20,000. The main difference between these options lie in items like painting exterior walls and replacing the entry fence and several doors. Funding and Funding and prioritization. At present, the Ministry of Justice, in collaboration with BZK and the National Recovery Program Bureau, NRPB, is actively evaluating the way forward based on the 3 intervention options and available funding. This assessment includes consideration of several important factors. 1, existing unallocated funds within the current project. 2, the structural lifespan of the Phillipsburg Police Station and whether long-term investment is justifiable. 3, the critical operational needs of KPSM, including safety and detention capacity. And 4, the working condition for staff. While approximately $300,000 remains available under the current NRPB allocation, this amount is insufficient to execute even the minimum scope. As such, the parties involved are reviewing whether additional support can be sourced from within the broader detention improvement funding framework without compromising other justice-related priorities. Next question. Our police headquarters is in a dilapidated state. Was there an assessment? If yes, how much will it cost the country? Madam Chair, through you, the NRPB, tasked with implementing infrastructure improvements at the police holding cells on behalf of the Ministry of Justice, was asked to request the company responsible for the initial improvements to conduct a preliminary assessment of the building's lifespan. This initial evaluation seems to confirm that the building has indeed passed its prime. A pre-inspection for the repair of the standing water, moisture, and leakage issues at the roof level and tower office of the Simpson Bay Police Station has been done. Cost of repairs will be approximately $5,000. Proposal is at the Ministry of General Affairs. A pre-inspection to determine the condition of the walls and the joints of the HQ has been conducted. Cost of repairs will be approximately $18,950. A detailed inspection of the MEP for the headquarters has been conducted in 2020. A quotation has been submitted to Kurt Ruwan from Fromi at that time. The total costs of repairs were at that time grand total plumbing, $40,000, grand total HAVAC, $225,000, grand total electrical, $330,000, and grand total communication and security, $275,000. Next question. Immigration processes are delayed way more than ever. What is being done to fix this problem? Madam Chair, through you, the delays in processing residency permits are the result of a backlog that has been built up over several years and due to a combination of factors. While limited staffing continues to affect overall capacity, we also acknowledge that the CRM automation system introduced in 2022 has not performed as intended and has contributed to the backlog. We are currently auditing the system and transitioning to purpose-built immigration software, which has proven to be effective and efficient. In parallel, we are reviewing internal work processes to improve efficiency. While delays are sometimes caused by incomplete or invalid submissions from applicants, we recognize that most proactive communication and better systems are needed to prevent such issues. Addressing this remains a priority for the ministry. Next question. Are discussions taking place regarding having all justice workers insured? What will the total premium be to secure proper insurance for justice workers? Madam Chair, through you. According to Chapter 10 of the Besluit Rex Politie St. Martin BRP, all civil servants, including police officers who are insured or suffer from long-term occupational illnesses, are entitled to appropriate support and compensation. This entitlement extends to their surviving dependents. In line with this legal framework, the Ministry of Justice is preparing advice for a national decree regarding a renewed agreement with Nagico Life Insurance. This group life insurance policy will cover all uniformed frontline personnel of the Ministry of Justice. The primary purpose of this insurance is to cover the government's legal liability towards its employees as outlined in their legal status. The annual premium for this policy is set at 371,304 guilders per year. The premium amount may vary based on the number of insured personnel. This insurance serves as a risk mitigation policy for the government, acknowledging that this group of employees works under higher risk conditions and that associated costs should be covered. Employees are not directly involved in this policy. Rather, any damages resulting from it will be paid out by the insurer instead of directly by government. This policy is a continuation of a previous agreement and aims to ensure that the government meets its legal obligations to provide compensation and support to its employees in the event of injury or long-term illness. I now move on to questions by the National Alliance faction. MP Duran. Question 1. Does the minister believe there is enough in the current budget to properly deal with the emergency at the prison? If not, what will be done to secure the necessary funds? Madam Chair, through you, at present, the ministry is conducting a comprehensive inventory of all costs related to the current crisis at the Point Blanche prison. Our Kingdom partners have made it clear that any request for financial assistance must be preceded by an effort to identify and exhaust available options within our own national budget. As such, we are actively reallocating funds from existing budget posts to address the most urgent needs. In parallel, we are in ongoing discussions with the Ministry of Finance to explore how they may further support us in managing the financial burden. It is important to note, however, that these emergency decisions will likely have downstream consequences. Specifically, they may impact our ability to pursue other planned initiatives later in the year, as existing funds are being redirected to deal with the crisis. The ministry is therefore weighing each decision carefully to strike a balance between immediate necessity and long-term planning. Next question. If the government is presenting a budget for Parliament to pass, but saying in advance that it is not enough, not adequate, not correct, why are you submitting it to Parliament to be passed? The rationale should be include what you need and then bring it. Has this changed from 2025 budget 1.0 to 2025 budget 2.0? Madam Chair, through you, this budget 2.0 contains no changes for justice versus the amendment submitted in January. Next question. I saw an article in which reference was made of justice workers not properly insured with life insurance and other insurance that came out right after the incident at the House of Detention. Is there any truth to this article? If this is the case, that they don't have proper insurance, what is being done to address this situation, and where do we need to shift monies from? How can we shift priorities to make sure that this is not the case? Madam Chair, through you, the Ministry of Justice is preparing advice for a national decree regarding a renewed agreement with Nagico Life Insurance. This group life insurance policy will cover all uniform frontline personnel of the Ministry of Justice. The primary purpose of this insurance is to cover the government's legal liability towards its employees as outlined in their legal status. It is therefore not correct to suggest that these personnel are being deployed in the line of duty without any coverage. On the contrary, the ministry is actively working to formalize and strengthen the existing framework to ensure legal and financial protection for all frontline staff in accordance with applicable regulations. Next question. We know that the Ministry of Justice is short-staffed. Whether this has to do with prison guards, police, or people working behind the scenes, is there, in the minister's view, enough money in this year's budget to recruit and train the amount of people needed to execute the tasks of these different organizations? Madam Chair, through you, to answer the question directly, no. The current 2025 budget does not fully provide the funding needed to recruit and train the number of individuals ideally required to close all existing capacity gaps. However, beyond funding, there is also a practical challenge that must be acknowledged. We are now in the month of June, and we must be realistic about the time frame remaining in the year. Even if additional resources were available, the recruitment process from advertising to screening to training takes time. Moreover, all justice-related entities are essentially fishing from the same pond, competing for a very limited pool of qualified candidates. This is precisely why the ministry is simultaneously working on longer-term workforce planning and exploring creative solutions such as inter-island cooperation, targeted retention efforts, and regional recruitment, while continuing to push for structural investments in our human capacity. Next question. What is the multi-year plan to address the shortfalls when it comes to staffing? Madam Chair, through you, the ministry fully acknowledges that with the expansion of detention capacity, particularly under the new prison project, there will be increased pressure on staffing. Simply put, more cells will require more personnel, both custodial and support staff. To address this, we are currently in active discussions with our Kingdom partners, particularly the Netherlands, to explore sustainable solutions. At the same time, we are working closely with UNOPS and UNODC to develop both mid- and long-term planning frameworks, which include not only operational models, but also workforce projections and training needs. A financial picture is being developed in parallel to these efforts so that the necessary investments can be mapped out in a phased and realistic manner. The goal is to ensure that the new facility is not just built, but staffed, equipped, and managed in a way that improves long-term detention conditions and public safety. Next question. International reports and many local voices, including the inmates of the House of Detention, have been saying that conditions at the prison are inhumane. We know a new prison is coming, but it has been delayed, and it is still some years away. Does the current budget provide the minister with enough room to deal with immediate issues? If not, how much is required to deal with the immediate issues? Madam Chair, through you, as indicated, a financial picture is being developed. This will be made available once known. Did the Council of Advice give any advice on how the ministry is spending its money, especially when it comes to issues at the prison when it comes to staffing? Can the minister give some insights into these points if these were pointed out? Madam Chair, through you, no. This matter does not fall under the oversight or authority of the Council of Advice. The Council's mandate is specifically to provide legal and constitutional advice to the government and Parliament on draft legislation and certain policy matters submitted for review. It does not assess or on the operational allocation of funds or staffing decisions within ministries, including those related to the prison system. Next question. After the fire, there were different departments and groups that stepped in to help, such as the police, fire department, and Red Cross. Is there money set aside to support these types of joint responses in the future? Madam Chair, through you, as this crisis is currently being managed, these discussions can take place once a comprehensive overview has taken place. Next question. Since the new prison will not be ready anytime soon, What is being done to keep the current prisons safe and functional? Are there plans for small fixes that the ministry can put in place this year to ease some of the pressure? Madam Chair, through you, the fire has indeed set the organization back significantly in its planning efforts, requiring an immediate shift in focus toward short-term recovery. That recovery plan is currently underway and includes temporary repairs, increased staffing through Kingdom support, enhanced security measures, and crisis management protocols. Following this, a medium-term stabilization plan is being developed in collaboration with UNOPS and UNODC to bridge the gap until the new facility becomes operational. However, it is important to emphasize that the timeline for construction of the new facility remains unaffected. In parallel, the ministry is actively implementing a series of targeted short-term interventions to relieve pressure on the current facility, such as repurposing and securing alternative detention space, reallocating international resources, and accelerating maintenance where feasible. These measures are intended to safeguard continuity of operations while preparing the system for a full transition to the new facility once completed. Next question. After the fire, a lot of follow-up actions were needed to normalize the situation, like inmate health care and repairs. What is the plan to deal with these extra costs, and what has this amounted to thus far? Madam Chair, through you, this is currently being assessed and will be provided to Parliament within short. Next question. When the fire happened, the inmates had to move to police holding cells in Simpson Bay, and some had to be sent off island. Was there enough financial flexibility to handle this emergency? Madam Chair, through you, there were no costs involved in transporting the inmates to holding cells in Simpson Bay. The costs involved transporting 6 inmates to Bonaire were the airfare amounting to $8,000. Next question. Is there money set aside for the ministry to call in help from other organizations or professionals if a similar situation is to happen again in the future? Madam Chair, through you, at present, there are no specific funds earmarked for this purpose. However, the ministry remains committed to building strategic partnerships and will continue to explore flexible funding options and interagency support mechanisms to respond swiftly to unforeseen crises when they arise. Next question. Based on the support that St. Martin has been receiving from Aruba and not sure where else, are we paying for this? What is the cost? How is the minister planning to cover these costs? Madam Chair, through you, the government of St. Martin is indeed responsible for covering the associated costs of external personnel support. While the full cost overview has not yet been finalized, we can confirm that Curacao provided assistance with the understanding that St. Martin would reimburse the related expenses. Similarly, Aruba has contributed personnel support with some costs, such as daily allowances and accommodations, already being borne by St. Martin. The ministry is currently compiling a full financial overview and is exploring available budget lines, as well as discussing options with the Ministry of Finance to ensure that these emergency expenditures can be responsibly managed. I now move on to questions posed by MP Arian. The inmates won a court case to be placed back at Point Blanche. Is this true? How much time do you have left as a government to do that? What is the cost, and how does Minister of Justice plan to address this? Madam Chair, through you, the inmates have been returned to the Point Blanche prison. There were no costs associated. Next question. What is the total cost of the prison fire repair, and how far is government with the repair? What is the current timeline? Where are the funds coming from for the repairs, and what is the line item? Madam Chair, through you, the fire was an unfortunate incident that took us all by surprise. In response to this event, we promptly took action to allocate the necessary resources from our existing budget to address the costs related to the damage and recovery efforts. This process required a careful assessment of our financial capacities, our capabilities, and prioritization of immediate needs to ensure an effective and timely response. To date, 275,919 guilders and 9 cents has been spent, and we continue to manage the situation. A final determination of the overall cost is still in progress. Next question. Can we get a total amount of consultants per cabinet and ministers and the budget post amount? Also, the total value of those contracts. Madam Chair, through you, the Ministry of Justice currently has 1 consultant in the amount of 42,000 guilders on minister's budget post. The consultant is needed for the appeals committee for the LBA project that was not previously budgeted for. Next question. Provide the total travel expenses of the last 6 months per minister and per cabinet, both items. Minister's budget post, 35,810 guilders and 74 cents. Cabinet budget post, 16,634 guilders and 31 cents. I now move on to questions posed by MP York. How many people are waiting to serve jail time? Madam Chair, through you, currently, the combined total of outstanding jail time awaiting enforcement is approximately 300 years. This figure reflects cumulative sentences, not individual persons, as some may have multiple convictions. Next question. Can the minister provide a copy of the proposal from the lawyer representing the Inmate Association? What did the minister receive? When did the minister receive that information? Madam Chair, through you, yes, the ministry received a draft version of a proposed ministerial regulation regarding early release with electronic monitoring. However, during our meeting, the lawyer representing the Inmates Association indicated that the proposal was not yet finalized. In that same meeting, we explained that under the current legal framework, electronic monitoring cannot serve as an alternative to detention, and that any such change would require a formal legislative amendment. We did, however, express our willingness to explore longer-term reforms and committed to working collaboratively on possible solutions, including reviewing the legislation if deemed necessary and feasible. At this time, there is only an early draft and no completed or finalized proposal from the lawyer that can be formally considered or shared. Next question. Is there a legal basis for electronic monitoring? If not, what law is the prosecutor using? Why can't the minister use the same law? Isn't the funding coming out of the justice budget? Madam Chair, through you. Yes, Article 1.32 Criminal Code. However, not as an isolated alternative to detention, but rather strictly as a condition for early conditional release on the basis of Article 137 of the Criminal Code due to a shortage of cell capacity. Next question. How much does the government spend on an inmate per day? Madam Chair, through you, this cannot be provided at this time as it incorporated in the operational costs. It is incorporated in the operational costs. My apologies. Next question. When the government builds a new prison, what would the cost to the country be from staff, food, electricity, and water to maintenance? Madam Chair, through you, at this time, we only have preliminary figures concerning the full operational costs of the new prison facility. However, it is important to emphasize that the new final cost structure will depend on a number of key factors, including 1, how and when the additional detention capacity is phased in, the staffing model, 2, the staffing model and level of in-house services, 3, the types of partnerships or outsourcing we engage in for facility operations, 4, the rehabilitation and reintegration programs we choose to implement, and 5, and what financial space exists within the national budget. These choices will not only influence long-term costs, but also the effectiveness and sustainability of the prison system. The ministry is working with both UNOPS and UNODC to develop realistic operational scenarios and cost estimates, and remains in active discussion with the Ministry of Finance to align these projects with future budget cycles. Next question. The new prison should be for 200 inmates, so the cost should be times that amount. Can St. Martin carry those costs? Where would the extra income come from? Madam Chair, through you, the planned new facility is projected to accommodate 196 inmates. Realistically, this is well below the number of enforceable sentences currently pending, a fact that underscores the scale of the challenge we face. However, the decision to proceed with this capacity was based on feasibility, balancing what is operationally needed with what is financially and logistically achievable at this time. Of course, we recognize that operational costs will scale with occupancy, and careful planning is required to ensure that these costs remain sustainable. As mentioned earlier, choices will need to be made within the available budgetary space, and this will directly influence how and when full capacity is brought online. To support long-term sustainability, the ministry is also actively exploring models such as prison industries and revenue-generating programs, which are common in other jurisdictions, to help offset some of the prison's operational expenses. These initiatives, if implemented thoughtfully, can contribute to both the facility's financial resilience and to rehabilitation and reintegration goals. In short, while we acknowledge the costs involved, we are taking a phased and responsible approach, one that includes exploring alternative funding mechanisms, operational efficiencies, and potential partnerships to ensure this major investment remains viable. Please also keep in mind that prior to Irma, the prison budget was calculated for 144 prisoners. Next question. How much money would be available for the rehabilitation of inmates? These choices, Madam Chair, through you, these choices are yet to be made within the budgetary realities. Next question, can the minister provide an overview of the remaining batches and when this can be expected with dates and timelines? Madam Chair, through you, batches 14 and 15 will include the remainder of KPSM and IPBS personnel. Batch 16 designated explicitly for employees of the Point Blanche prison, consisting of 95 employees, of which is currently being validated. The completion of all LBAs for phase 1 is anticipated for the fourth quarter of 2025. This reflects our commitment to ensuring that all processes are handled thoroughly and effectively. We are dedicated to keeping all stakeholders informed as we progress towards this completion date. Next question. Notaries. Has there ever been an assessment done of the carrying capacity of notaries on the island? B, what is the status as it pertains to the workload? C, are they keeping up with the demand? And D, how is this measured? Madam Chair, through you, according to the National Ordinance on Notaries, 3 notaries were found to be sufficient for St. Martin. Also, notaries are assisted by candidate notaries. The appointment, supervision, and performance of notaries falls under the authority of the Joint Court of Justice. As such, the Ministry of Justice does not conduct direct oversight or evaluations in this area. However, we recognize the importance of ensuring adequate notarial services for the public and will take these questions into further discussions with the Joint Court and the notarial profession. Next question. Safety of the country prior, during, and after the storm or disaster is needed. Do we have the reserves to pay for said security when it comes to police officers from other countries, or will this be covered by a third party? If not, how much is budgeted for such? Madam Chair, through you, the safety of the country before, during, and after a disaster is very important and a government's responsibility. Pursuant to Measure A5 of the country package, a national plan is being developed that includes both disaster response and how to pay for it. This includes making sure there is money available to cover costs for extra security, such as assistance from other countries. These costs will need to be paid from the disaster risk financing strategy that is currently being developed with cooperation of the World Bank. I now move on to questions by the URSM faction, MP Roseberg. There was a motion in 2024 regarding the crime fund. The previous minister was requested to comply with the crime prevention ordinance and develop a comprehensive crime prevention policy for St. Martin. The motion was passed in October 2024. I would like to know where we are with the development of this policy. Minister already mentioned that the ministry was working hard on the policy and it would be ready for the budget amendment. Can this policy be submitted shortly? If not, when, being that it is obligated by law? Madam Chair, through you, in line with the recommendations of the Law Enforcement Council, an amendment to the National Ordinance governing the Crime Fund, along with an accompanying policy framework, is currently being drafted and is slated for completion in 2025. However, it is important to note that a policy plan for crime fund project financing cannot be submitted for approval until concrete project proposals have been received and evaluated. The ministry has proactively engaged a number of relevant organizations and invited them to submit proposals aligned with crime prevention goals. We are currently awaiting submissions from 3 potential projects. If found suitable, these will be incorporated into the policy plan and considered for financing under the crime fund. Next question. During a recent parliamentary session, the minister indicated that a policy on the use of ankle bracelets is currently being developed. I had suggested consulting relevant specialists such as Attorney Solveran, especially considering that a similar policy has been in effect in Curacao since 2015. Could the minister provide an update on the status of this policy, given its importance in addressing ongoing human rights concerns? I welcome clarification if any part of this understanding is incorrect. Madam Chair, through you, a document was indeed submitted to the ministry by Mr. Solveran within the past 2 weeks. However, we wish to emphasize that under current legislation, electronic monitoring cannot serve as an alternative to detention in St. Martin. While we acknowledge that similar policies may exist in other jurisdictions such as Curacao, our legal framework does not currently support such application. Given the ongoing prison crisis and the significant capacity constraints within the ministry, we have not yet been able to conduct an in-depth review or provide a comprehensive response to the proposal. That said, we recognize the relevance of exploring alternatives that align with both our detention challenges and human rights obligations. The ministry is therefore committed to working toward a longer-term approach, which may include reviewing and, if necessary, amending the applicable legislation. Next question. There were recommendations made in a recent report by the Law Enforcement Council dated June 6, 2025. Will the ministry take the advice of the Council and invoke Article 32 of the Kingdom Act of the Enforcement Council? Madam Chair, through you, the ministry acknowledges the recommendations outlined in the Law Enforcement Council's report of June 6, 2025. We continue to take these observations seriously and remain in active dialogue with our Kingdom partners as we explore the best course of action to strengthen the justice system and address the concerns raised. I now move on to questions posed by MP Webster. During the previous budget meeting, the MP inquired about Asikura. Could you provide an update on the current state of preparations? Madam Chair, through you, the implementation of Asikura remains a priority, and the plan of approach has been agreed upon between all relevant parties. The associated advice is currently before the Council of Ministers for formal approval. Once formal approval is obtained, we can proceed with finalizing the agreement, which outlines the financial and operational arrangements between St. Martin, the Teweyo, and UNCTAD. Given that St. Martin's contribution is categorized as capital expenditure, a reallocation of funds between the involved entities is required. As such, the Teweyo will engage directly with UNCTAD as their portion does not fall under CAPEX. Following the transfer, UNCTAD will send a technician team to St. Martin to set up the Asikura World System and connect the servers as outlined in the project plan. Additionally, an awareness campaign will be launched to introduce the project to the community. I now move on to questions posed by the DP faction. MP Westcott Williams. MP requests.
Minister Gumbs, before you continue, I see that MP, no, it's my mistake. Oh, for the speakers list. Okay. Thank you, MP. Thank you, Minister, for your indulgence. Yeah, no, it's the MP actually requiring to speak once you're finished. So you may continue, Minister. Thank you.
No problem. MP requests to provide an update on the answers given to herself and her faction members in the answers of the CC to first budget 2025. Several of those answers refer to things being updated and reports being expected. MP wants to know where we stand right now as per the answers given to the CC questions. There were several sorts of commitments made to questions asked in the first debate, budget 2025. See attached reference nota ain't verslag. Question 2, clarification and updates on the crime fund. The amendment to the national, Madam Chair, through you, the amendment to the national ordinance governing the crime fund in line with recommendations of the Law Enforcement Council accompanying the policy is currently being drafted and is slated for completion in Q4 of 2025. Next question. MP requests an update and in some cases answers to where matters stand with the motions as approved during the handling of the budget in first instance. The motions pertain to the following amendment to the mentally ill persons legislation, VSA, and justice. Madam Chair, through you, this draft legislation is currently in the preliminary phase with VSA. Feedback has been provided by the Ministry of Justice structural meetings. Next question. The ministry acknowledges the concerns raised by foster and prospective foster parents regarding the insufficiency of the current stipend in adequately covering the cost of caring for children in foster care. In response to these challenges, legislation is currently being drafted to increase the monthly stipend for the foster parents. Where is that at? Madam Chair, through you, this has the attention of the ministry based on the interministerial discussions which recognized the need for an increase. As the legislation is expected to be completed at the Q4, an increase of fees have been addressed in the 2026 budget. Next question. While illegal migration is a concern, overpopulation as a direct result of these flows has not been conclusively determined. The ministry has not observed a significant number of residency applications from individuals unable to demonstrate legal arrival on the island. To fully understand the impact of migration on St. Martin's population density and resources, a thorough data-driven study would be required. Is this being done or initiated? Madam Chair, through you, the Immigration and Border Protection Services, IBPS, continues to monitor migration trends closely through permit applications, entry records, and enforcement activities. These trends show migration patterns through and not to St. Martin. As noted, the data currently available does not show a significant volume of residency applications from individuals unable to demonstrate legal entry. That said, we recognize the importance of a comprehensive data-driven analysis to understand the broader demographic and infrastructural impacts of migration, both regular and irregular. We are open to collaborating with relevant agencies across the ministries of government. In the meantime, IBPS remains committed to ensuring migration controls are enforced in a manner that safeguards national interests while upholding due process. And last question, proposal prison rehabilitation training program 2024, has this been accepted to be executed? Madam Chair, through you, the soft components have not yet been implemented. UOPOS has completed the design and assigned responsibility for their execution. Discussions are currently underway with UNODC regarding their potential engagement for implementation. In parallel, the Minister, in coordination with BZK and VNP, is actively seeking funding to support this effort. That brings me to the end of the answering of the questions, Madam Chair, on behalf of the Minister of Justice, Ms. Natalie Tackling.
Thank you, Minister Gumbs, for the presentation of those answers regarding questions and topics of the Ministry of Justice. With that, of course, members of Parliament, we now have the opportunity as members of Parliament to react to some of the questions that you have received the answers to by the Minister, and I